The Egyptian army started a large-scale anti-terrorist operation in the Sinai Peninsula bordering Israel. Heavy weapons are being deployed to the area where extremist attacks on the military have been increasingly frequent. Details now then from RT's Paula Sleer.
What we do know is that the Egyptian military has closed all entrances in and out of the Sinai. It's launched a 48-hour operation to deal with a sudden increase in the number of Islamists operating there. The information that we have is that there have been violent clashes in the area of Sheikh al-Zayed. Now, not only centered there, but also in areas like Al Arish and other villages in the surrounding area. These clashes are between the army and extremists that have been operating there for quite some time now. Let me remind you that the situation in Sinai has been unruly ever since the overthrowing of the former Egyptian president Hosni Mubarak, and since then we've witnessed an increase in these kind of attacks, these kind of violent acts happening in the Sinai. What we're hearing from the army is that there are at least 500 extremist militants operating in an area of 4 square kilometers. Now, the army says that they are heavily armed. It says that they could use civilians in those areas as human shields, and at the same time the army has deployed both its air force and on-ground troops who are heavily armed. Allegedly, Muslim Brotherhood supporters are taking up arms and are going to the Sinai, where they are joining these Islamist groups. From the army, we're hearing that they're being fired on, that they're being attacked by these extremist elements. More than 60 Bedouin tribes signed a memorandum that they support the Egyptian army and that this is a support for the Egyptian people. They're trying to put some kind of order there, but the situation is merely continuing to descend into chaos.
Paula Sleer, our Middle East correspondent. Well, for more on the operation in Sinai, let's talk to terrorism and Middle East expert Walid Farah is joining us on the line now. Hi there, Walid. Who are these people that are launching attacks on the security forces in Sinai, then, as you see it?
It is basically a mix of many people. Originally, these were members of the Jama'ah Islamiyya, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood years ago, of the Islamic Jihad of Egypt, whose chairman was Zawahiri, the current head of Al-Qaeda. But then with time, specifically over the past 2 to 3 years, many international jihadists have been joining them, some coming from Sudan, from Libya, from other parts of the Middle East, also international ones from Central Asia and from Chechnya. But of course, the numbers of the international ones is very small. The Egyptian army now, as far as we can see, is waging an operation in northern Sinai, where the bulk of these forces have been operating against the military, both the police and the soldiers of Egypt.
With the ultimate aim of?
Making sure that these forces, the jihadi forces, won't have an enclave. The Egyptian army, that is, knows that had the Morsi regime continued few more months, according to information from the Egyptian army, of course, there would have been a declaration of an emirate of northern Sinai. It's online, actually. The information is now made public. And that would be the equivalent of Waziristan, for example, in Pakistan, or northern Mali. So the Egyptian army first concern is to make sure that there will be no exclusive control by those terrorists. And then, of course, the Egyptian army knows that they're going to be fighting a long war against the terrorists in Sinai and most likely also in mainland Egypt.
Yes, so it begs the next question. Just how effectively can the army deal with this threat as they see it?
Look, the Egyptian army is well trained. It is an army that has experience of wars, not just being pro-Western, but it was also involved in wars with Israel. But any army in the world, even the superpowers, the United States or Russia or others, when it comes to direct confrontation with a quasi-regular force, meaning a Taliban force in Afghanistan, or in this case, a jihadi force in northern Sinai, the Egyptian army will be able to dismantle the resistance. But what the Egyptian army will have to face, like any other army in the world fighting terrorism, is a long-range guerrilla warfare. And that guerrilla warfare, you cannot end it only with military means. You need other means as well.
Is there another aspect to this, i.e. that the army are trying to wipe out any potential political opponents brewing there?
Oh, they don't need. They had 30 to 33 million Egyptians walking on the streets of Cairo if the opponent is basically the Muslim Brotherhood. So the political battle is happening in Cairo and major other cities. And in this case, a slight majority or a larger majority of Egyptians have chosen the secular government instead of the Muslim Brotherhood, which remains a very strong opposition. Northern Sinai is a different story. It is really the jihadist armed forces who may or may not have a link to the Muslim Brotherhood, but their intention was to create that enclave on the Mediterranean in around El Arish city of northern Sinai.
But these people were a headache for Morsi's government too. He didn't manage to deal with them very effectively, did he?
No, he was not. Now, the criticism of Morsi is he could have ordered the same Egyptian army to go and do the same operations a year and a half ago, but he did not. And the reason why he did not is that some of his right-wingers, meaning the Noor Salafi party, have links to those jihadists. They come from the same background. And we remember 6 months ago, Morsi government sent a delegation to negotiate with those jihadists. That was one of the criticisms by the army and by the secular parties.
Well, Faris, thanks ever so much for your thoughts.